I have here a piece of paper, as someone once famously said, and we'll come back to this in a moment, but there seems to have been rather a lot of interest shown in this BSA Gold Stars aftermarket, what turns out to more than likely be Eddie Dow alloy top yoke. And among many comments and suggestions, I'd just like to sort of recap on a few things. It's been suggested that there should be, you know, the nut that secures, if you like, the top yoke to the stem, and then a lock nut. Well, actually, if I undo this damper knob a little bit, get it out the way. In fact, I'll get it right out the way for now. The steering damper assembly is down there. It's not complete. There's no friction discs or anything with it, but that doesn't really matter. Right, we can see that that is the nut that tightens or secures the top yoke, well, supposedly to the stem of the bottom yoke, but it's not really, that's not really what it does. And then this chrome one is the lock nut. Now both of these screw on to the threads of a sleeved castle nut, which passes right through the yoke. It's a close fit in the bore of the hole through the yoke, and the castellated sleeve nut is what is used to adjust and set the steering head bearings correctly. Now that's all well and good, and as I've already explained, that works. But when we come to fit the top yoke over it and then tighten this nut up, unfortunately tightening this nut makes the underside of the top yoke bear down on the steering head bearings, and if you tighten this enough, then all of a sudden the steering head bearings become too stiff and tight, because there's no means of locking off your preset adjustment on the sleeved castellated nut which passes through the top yoke. Now with the original setup, which would have looked something like this, this is actually off a BSA Bantam, but it's the same design. You can clearly see that there's a slot in it there, and you'd have a pinch bolt with a nut on it that after you've adjusted the steering head bearings, tension, play, call it what you want, preload, you just tighten this bolt, nut and bolt that would be here, and that would make the top yoke clamp securely on the sleeve nut which passes through and bears down on the steering head bearings. So then your top yoke would be nicely clamped basically to the stem of the bottom yoke. And also the holes for the fork stanchions are tapered, as are the forks, and when you do the top nuts of those up, it pulls the tapers into the tapered holes and locks the stanchions in place. Well, we've got that on the Dow top yoke. We've got the tapers and everything's done up tightly and locked, but the top yoke itself is not really locked to the stem of the bottom yoke, because all we can do is nip this nut up and then a little extra, and then we have to do the lock nut up on it. So there's your lock nut. So you do that one up, but not too tightly, otherwise you compromise your steering head bearings, of course, and then you lock this one against the nut. But that doesn't in itself lock this securely to the sleeve nut, which incidentally has a split along its length from top to bottom to take up the clamping effect of the original top yoke, which would have been like this when you did the nut and bolt, the pinch bolt. So we just haven't got that. Now, to sort of further explain the sort of deficiencies of this design, if you've got a motorbike, any motorbike, like the well, if we look over here, Trials Tiger Cub has got it. The Honda 500 Twin, if we can see that, has also got it. The Trident. Right, most bikes, if not all of them. Royal Enfields look like they haven't got anything, but they've actually got a cotter pin arrangement underneath the top yoke, so even they clamp their top yokes firmly to the stem of the bottom yoke, which is not the case with this. Now, imagine if I was to, well, I wouldn't, I'd have to be completely loopy if I wanted to do it, but imagine if I wanted to see how the Trident handled at speed if I decided I'd just undo this, slacken it off, and then go for a blast and hit the front brake. Now chances are I would probably feel, as I braked, I'd probably feel the front wheel wanting to slew to the side that the disc is on, and that's because I'd have that undone. In the case of this machine here, we can't do that, but unfortunately it would have been a better idea if we could, because you really need this fastened tightly to the stem somehow. Now a way around it might have been, if there was enough stem or enough sleeve nut or whatever, would be to have a sleeve nut with a flange on it that bore down on the steering head bearings, that could then allow this top yoke to sit on its flange. Then we could do the lock nut up here as tight as we wanted and not affect the adjustment on the steering head bearings. Then we could do the lock nut up and everything would be fine. But we haven't got that, and it's been suggested that maybe there might be some elements or components of this design missing. Well, no, I can assure you they're not, because we'll take a look at this now. This was kindly, a link was kindly sent to me in one of the comments on my last video about this machine and the top yoke and the steering head bearings and all the fun I've had with them. So hopefully we might just be able to sort of see that and read it. I've read it, and I can assure anybody that might be interested that there's certainly nothing missing and everything's as it was intended to be. It's just it wasn't a very great idea in the first place, really. It looks great, looks lovely, doesn't it? Nice alloy top yoke. Oh, that'll save a bit of weight, but it'll also possibly compromise the handling a little bit as well. And I can see there in the bottom yoke, whether the camera will pick this up or not, actually someone's even gone to the trouble of drilling a few holes across the front of that. Can't really sort of, I can see them, but I don't think the camera will pick them up necessarily. And that reminds me of the time I saw a Norton Commando racer at Mallory Park, and there were so many holes drilled in it and all over it, it looked like a piece of cheese. And then, do you know what? Sat on it was this great big fat guy stuffing a burger down his mouth. And well, the mind boggles really, doesn't it? But anyway, I'd rather have the heavier forged steel BSA type top yoke on this, even if it did weigh a little bit more than this aluminium one. I'm sure the bike would handle a lot better if the top yoke was firmly clamped to the bottom yoke's stem, as is usually the case on most machines. But we haven't got that here. I'll see how it rides. I'm not going to push my luck on it. Obviously it's something that many people must have used, but it has got a shortcoming, and like I say, this nut here has a direct impact on the steering head bearings even after they've already been adjusted via the sleeve nut. So all round, not a great idea at all, but we'll give it the benefit of the doubt and see what it goes like when I've got the new tyres on the wheels and the wheels back on. We'll have a little ride on it, but like I say, my expectations of it are not really great as far as handling might be concerned, although I'm sure it might save £1 or so in precious weight. But there we go, all that glitters, as they say, and I think we've got an example of that right there.